information released this weekend from the super-secret FISA court involving the warrant to wiretap former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page. Well, the warrant refers repeatedly to Page working with the Russian government, essentially calling him an agent of that country. It also contradicts many of the allegations Trump himself and those loyal to him have made about how the Russian investigation actually started. To talk about all of this, I am joined by Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and MSNBC contributor, Natasha Bertrand, staff writer for The Atlantic, and also an MSNBC contributor, and Malcolm Nance, MSNBC terrorism analyst and author of The Plot to Destroy Democracy. It's great to have all of you with us on what is a very busy week and weekend. Malcolm, let me start with you and really kind of talking about these new poll numbers that we just got. We saw a jump in the number of people who now believe that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in the wake of the Trump-Putin news conference and the recent indictment of 12 Russians in the case that was presented by Bob Mueller. What does that say to you about the public attitude and the sentiment in this country about this issue?
I think it goes to 2 points. The first one being that the Department of Justice, for the first time, really to the general public, presented real evidence from the indictment of the 12 Russian intelligence officers, and not just general description of what they did. Name, practically rank, service number, office location, logins into their computers, and how they attacked the United States. That gave context to Donald Trump's obsequiousness to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and essentially turning the United States into a junior partner of an ex-KGB officer who ordered those Russian intelligence officers to attack the United States. The American public's waking up, and I don't think it's going to do very well for Donald Trump.
Now, here's the interesting thing on that point, though. It doesn't seem like it's affected Donald Trump very much, Natasha, because the numbers on Russia, despite those that we just kind of highlighted, this is kind of mind-boggling. The president's approval ratings actually went up a point, and his approval among Republicans, believe it or not, is at a record high. We just put that up there on the screen. You see it, 88% of Republicans approve of how he's handling his job. Is that a cause for concern as we look at a potential Mueller probe, that in fact everything is now being seen through a political lens?
It is really remarkable that supporters of Trump are still standing by him even after this incredible press conference that he gave last week with Putin. I mean, we've seen that the numbers broadly in the general population are very, very negative, that the majority of people, as that poll showed, disapprove of that performance because it was just so shocking, especially after the announcement of the indictment of these 12 GRU officers, as Malcolm pointed out. But I do think that it also shows that Trump understands the power of repetition. He keeps saying over and over and over again, he's drilling it into his supporters' heads, that the Mueller investigation is a witch hunt. And now we still see this happening, where the Carter Page FISA memo, the FISA application, was released by the FBI, by the Justice Department, in a remarkable development. This is something that's extremely rare. And even though that application, the FISA application that's been so contested over the last few months, shows plainly in black and white that so many of House GOP, House Republican Devin Nunes, all of his claims were just based in bad faith, there are still people, and Donald Trump is one of them, who say that it shows that the FBI improperly surveilled the Trump campaign. Of course, when you read that, that makes absolutely no sense, because Carter Page had already left the campaign by the time the FBI was wiretapping him. But we see that these talking points persist, and that just shows how politicized all of this intelligence has become.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on that point, because I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm pretty sure President Trump did not read the 412 pages from the Freedom of Information Act request and the FISA warrant application. So let me hone in a little bit on the issue of this FISA warrant and Carter Page himself. Listen to this, Jill.
You did advise the Kremlin back in 2013 or 2012, somewhere in there.
Jake, it's really spin. I mean, I sat in on some meetings, but to call me an advisor, I think is way over the top. Informal, having some conversations with people. I mean, this is really nothing, and just an attempt to distract from the real crimes that are shown in this misleading document.
So the point that I was trying to make there, Jill, and to Natasha's point, that the president did not read the 412-page document that came out, but he's coming out and spinning this in his favor, saying that, as you could see there, it shows that the Department of Justice and the FBI misled the courts. He uses the word witch hunt, rigged, a scam. What's your takeaway, Jill, from what we've learned from these new revelations and the president's reaction? Does this in any way, shape, or form vindicate the president?
It doesn't vindicate the president, and it takes us back to the Nunes memo, which then the the Democrats answered and showed how false the Nunes memo was. They have been portraying something that is total fantasy. The FISA warrant had a probable cause showing that 4 judges appointed by Republicans looked at and said, yes, there's reason to believe that Carter Page is being recruited, that he may be cooperating with the Russians, and that we should surveil him. That remains true no matter what anybody has said. But I think, to your question to Natasha, we should all be concerned that there are any Republicans left who still believe the president. There was an indictment that laid out a very strong case. We saw his performance, which is exactly the opposite of the strong man he's supposed to be. It showed him as submissive to Putin. And I don't know why anyone is left who still believes that he is doing the right thing and that he isn't endangering our country.
Malcolm, I want you to put on a counterintelligence hat for a moment and help us understand something. When the Russians, maybe you have the mindset of getting a sense of how they operate, are they casting a net for people like Paul Manafort, Carter Page, with the hopes that they ultimately become influential within American politics and then have something on them where they can leverage? Or is it that they are targeting these individuals specifically because of any specific connections they may have? Because it's hard to look at Carter Page and Paul Manafort and expect them to reach the positions that they would have reached. What is the Russian thinking in going after these types of individuals?
Well, both ways that you described it are correct. They do wide casting to see who they can scoop up. And, as Naveed Jamali, who actually worked for the Russians as a double agent with the FBI, said, they actually collect people. They just keep them on tether until they need them. On the other hand, they do targeted collection, where they go after individuals. But what we're seeing here, and this is what we called out almost 2 years to the day here at MSNBC 2 years ago, was a very integrated Russian intelligence operation, which spanned years. And for it to take place, they had to have had some indication that they would be running an asset who would facilitate this. And it's since come to light, and I wrote about it in my book, Donald Trump made his decision to run for president on November 6, 2012. And there's evidence to that. He actually registered Make America Great PAC a week after Barack Obama won his second election. And he was already in communications with Russians back then. When he made his final decision was most likely after Miss Universe pageant. So all of these things collectively, the Russians, as a country led by a KGB officer, would have started an integrated operation to collect more people, put them in positions of power, especially Manafort. It is very suspicious how a man that has been working with the Kremlin for a decade got into his position of power.